All right, so the last part of this presentation is some of my favorite buildings, um, just because I think they're so interesting and these are really accessible. Um, so some of them are really accessible. I find them really interesting. Um, so we'll start with cooperative housing. Now, this is something that I don't think a whole lot of people know about in the U.S. anyway. Now, there are cooperative housing complexes in the U.S. Even in Philadelphia, there's cooperative housing. You go country by country, and it's sort of different in terms of their awareness and acceptance of cooperative housing. So, what is a cooperative housing? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's housing that's cooperatively owned and cooperatively managed by a group of people. So, when you live in cooperative housing, you're not renting from a landlord or you're not purchasing from another person. You're actually buying into the whole cooperative. So if there's multiple apartments or multiple buildings in the cooperative, you're actually a co-owner of that. And so you have an equal say in everything that goes on in that co-op. So it's meant to be more democratic and more kind of socially oriented, where they'll have most of these will have like common areas where people gather. They'll have like a common kitchen as an option where people can all cook together, or they'll even have a lot of them will have apartments that are connected, so almost like a house with bedrooms, and everyone has their own room, their own private space, but then they share the kitchen and they share the main living area and the living room and what other spaces as well. So there's cooperative housing just means it's cooperatively owned and cooperatively managed. There's all different kinds of these. I mean, there's houses, there's whole communities, there's apartment buildings, there's literally city blocks that are cooperatively owned. I'll actually show you a couple here today. But they're generally very intentional, and folks that get involved in cooperative housing want to like build a community and be part of a community and go beyond just their own little private space and work together. Most of them will have some sort of, as part of their sort of ethos, some kind of sustainability. If we're sharing a living room, that means we cut down on the number, we cut back on our personal electricity use because we're sharing, television with other people. If we all share a kitchen, that cuts down on the energy use in the kitchen. It also cuts down on all the stuff, all the waste that you make, all the space that you need, which means land that you take up. So all of it is more efficient in terms of resource use. Um, and the management process is really interesting. All of them that I've ever encountered and read about they have like a council that's elected by the cooperative, and everybody can run. Some of them say like everybody has to at some point serve in some manner. So it's just a really interesting way to live and sort of a totally different mentality in some ways. And some of them are pretty strict. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures of one. I've had the pleasure and fortune of visiting a couple of these in Switzerland. So I've taken students to Switzerland a few times to see energy efficiency and sustainability things. And so we visited some cooperative housing. And so this is one in Zurich. It's called Kalkbreit. This is a picture of it. This is just about a city block. Okay, so all of this whole thing is owned cooperatively. So there's apartments, there's shared apartments, there's sort of individual apartments. This is all public space. I mean, cooperatively owned space. So it's a nice place to hang out. There's a little playground. Um, and there's actually a couple of businesses in here. There's a restaurant down here. There's a travel agency down here. And it's all cooperatively owned. So they're not privately owned. Some of them have like businesses that are not owned by the cooperative, but the cooperative rents out the space, that sort of thing. But all of this is owned. This is downtown Zurich, which is it's like in the top three most expensive places to live in the world. Literally, like that's how expensive it is. So to have a city block like this and have that sort of like dedication to develop this housing, so the city helps sort of subsidize this and so forth. And this is just more pictures of it. So this is a really one of the stricter ones that I've seen. Um, you're actually not allowed to own a car. That's part of your agreement, your cooperative agreement. So you can't own a car unless you need it for your business. Um, And this is the bike area underneath, as you can imagine, a lot of bikes. Switzerland is also known worldwide for its public transportation. Like it's really good, reliable, punctual public transportation. And so you can live in the city and you don't really need a car. They're not actually allowed to own a car. You're not allowed to own your own washing machine. You have to use, there's basically like a laundromat in the building. You have very little control over your heating and cooling in your own apartment. You kind of have a little bit of a dial, a couple of degrees here and there, but you're kind of at the mercy of everyone else. And there's a lot of common spaces. This is the rooftop. There's a little rooftop garden with a community garden. Just a great spot. Um, Another one that we visited in Zurich is called Mehr als Wohnen. And so this is the original architectural um, mock-up, whatever you call that. So the architects in the room will know. So these are scale models of all of these buildings. Okay, so again, this is like a whole city block. All of them are cooperatively owned. Um, so not individually, but all of them at the same time. So if I live in this little apartment here, I am a part owner of this whole complex. And there's businesses and so forth in that as well. This is a picture of Mayor Alsvonen. Really cool architecture. Got these nice green living walls, I guess you could call them. Here's inside of one of the apartments. So that a lot of these cooperatives are like this, very sort of artistic and interesting. So this is inside some shared apartment. This is the stairwell. I just thought the stairwell was pretty cool. So, so that's your cooperative housing. Again, there's cooperative housing all over the world. I mean, this is kind of like the old school way to live. If you've ever had like an anthropology class or an ancient history class, you know that people lived together, like families lived in with extended family or their tribes or whatever they were. They all lived together. So this is kind of like an old, you know, Back to the Future kind of thing. Um, so the second type, sort of general type of it's green-ish, I guess you could say, because not all tiny homes are green. But tiny houses have become really big in terms of recognition. I mean, there's TV shows, multiple TV shows about tiny houses. There's tiny house communities popping up, and so forth. So there's no universally accepted definition of a tiny house. The one that I've always sort of stuck to is anything that's 500 square feet or less, you can call it a tiny home. Some of these are 100 square feet. Some of these are 70 square feet. And some of them, are just small houses and they're maybe 800 square feet. Most of them are on wheels. Okay, so you see this here. So that's one of the benefits of these. Um, it's you can move it, and also that relaxes some of the permitting requirements as well. If you don't have a permanent foundation, there's a lot more that you can do. There's a lot less approvals that you have to get through the local jurisdiction. These tend to be just they're really compact, so they reduce your resource use. They generally reduce your energy use. A lot of them will have like solar panels integrated on the top, and so it kind of forces you to also be outside more too. So there's sort of like a broader appreciation of nature aspect to a lot of these. And there's been some really innovative uses of these. I posted a video about the homeless village in Colorado. So more than one place has used tiny homes to help house the homeless. Um, but there's other interesting applications for this as well. So this isn't always green because the materials may or may not be sustainable materials, but it does reduce your resource use and sort of limits your overall material consumption. Another one that we've talked about before, but I wanted to give you an example, is straw bale. So this is an actual straw bale home. This is in a place I visited in Denmark, and these walls are made of straw. And you can see here, it shows you the straw bales. And this was, I want to say, like 10 years old at the time, and it really, you wouldn't necessarily think that straw bale holds up over time, but it does. As long as you build it properly. I mean, you still need framing and everything, but the straw bale acts as sort of this natural building material and really good insulation. Um, and it looks, I thought I had some pictures of inside it, but I guess I don't. And it looks like a nice normal home. And you can see here's what we had talked about earlier. I remember this is pretty common in Denmark, where in the summer they'll open up these windows up here and then the open doors down here, which sort of allows air to naturally cool the building, and certainly also convection, it basically facilitates the stack effect as well. And the last type I want to go over is the Cobb House. So Cobb we had looked at in an earlier video. So Cobb is this mixture. There's no one sort of Cobb recipe, but generally has clay, sand, straw. Sometimes have gravel, just some soil in there, but the clay is really important. The straw is actually really important because that gives it structure. It's kind of like the rebar and the concrete. And sand is also important too to sort of hold things together. Um, there's buildings examples all over the place. This is kind of an interesting process. It's built differently. You sort of build it like layer and then you build a layer, let that dry, and then put another layer on it, let it dry, and so on. So you sort of build from the ground up, literally, with these. One really cool thing is that you can make this any shape. It's mostly clay, so you can make round walls. I mean, you can make all kinds of designs and accents. Um, it's very durable. It's a really good thermal mass. This is sort of your classic desert architecture. So you like adobe is a form of cob, if you're familiar with adobe houses. Um, so it does have a good thermal mass, good air seal. It's not a great R value, but you can, sort of add insulation on top. Cob ovens are not uncommon. It's really great for outdoor ovens. And this is a picture of a Cobb house. So you can see you probably wouldn't even think this is, anything different. But this is actually all made of cob. Here's the inside of a different Cobb house. So again, you can make all these little architectural sort of flares in there. And this just happened to be, I was walking around in Moab, Utah one time, and I saw this cob wall. So you can just, build a wall, build, a little like retaining wall, or just a decorative wall out of cob as well. It's pretty easy to do if you have the right materials. Okay, so that's it for the additional sustainable building types. So remember we went over cooperative housing, we went over tiny houses, straw bale houses, and cob. And that'll do it for this sustainable buildings presentation.